to Wild and Weird Radio, a Wild and Weird West Virginia podcast.
In 1911, a new train departed from a station in Italy with 100 passengers and 6 crew members for a complimentary promotional tour to promote a new line. The train checked in at the stations along the route without any delays. On its route was the Lombardy Tunnel, a half-kilometer long through a section of mountain. Witnesses watching the new train speed by reported seeing it enter the tunnel, but the train never again reemerged. A full investigation was conducted, which only raised more questions. No wreckage was ever recovered. There was no sign the train had even existed, except for 2 passengers who came forward and claimed to have been on board. This was later verified by the manifest. They said as the train approached the tunnel, a thick white fog came from out of nowhere, and a strange humming was heard. The passengers began to fear an accident was imminent, and 2 of them jumped clear of the train right before it entered the tunnel. After some years, a relative of one of the passengers was researching the story and made a shocking discovery. A search of records showed that in 1840, a Mexican hospital had received 104 Italian patients who were in a mentally deranged state. Psychiatrists who treated them said they were all in strange clothing, and more disturbingly to the medical staff at the time, all of them told the exact same story of how they had traveled in a Zanetti train from Rome in Italy. They had several items in their possession, including a cigar box marked with a 1907 manufacture date. This box is still preserved in a Mexican museum. But this story didn't end there. Further research seems to show a possible sighting of the train recorded in the Middle Ages. There are records from medieval monks from Medina who saw a 3-car train with people in it, but railroads hadn't been invented yet. They described the passengers were clean, shaven, and dressed in black as if they belonged to a cult or the work of some evil forces. Still, other sightings seem to persist. On October 29, 1955, a signalman from Zavlachi, a small town in the Ukraine, was on duty when he noticed an unscheduled train coming. He reported a 3-card old-fashioned train moving soundlessly toward Gasford Mountain without tracks. There are many other accounts from witnesses of encountering people and places that seem out of place and out of time, of seeing future events before they occur, meeting past or future people who seem to somehow exist in a place between time and space. Are there strange anomalies and ripples in time? Can these fluctuations possibly explain ghosts and other paranormal phenomena? Can people and things somehow be swept up and caught up like the Zanetti train, somehow ending up skipping through time and space endlessly? You might be surprised at what we find tonight in this episode of Wild and Weird Radio.
Welcome to Wild and Weird Radio, a Wild and Weird West Virginia podcast. Tonight, your hosts are going to be talking about time slips, time warps, and some time travel. So hang in there, guys. It is going to get wild and weird. And also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you're already watching the video on YouTube, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and carry on. All right. So let's go ahead and dive into the wild and weird news, guys. How are y'all doing?
Doing great. How about personal news first? Anything new in your world?
No, just moving along on this this remodel down here in the basement. We're getting ready to the point where we're getting ready to put ceiling up, and then I can quit blurring out the background.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
See, I didn't know if you were kidnapped and taken to a secret underground base where you're doing this podcast from. So
that's kind of what it feels like, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I kind of thought that's what was going on too.
So another awesome news during this remodel, I mashed the crap out of my finger.
That
there
looks fun.
Yeah, it bled. Never hit yourself in the hand with a hammer while it's against a concrete floor. It doesn't end well.
no taking.
That is something that you guys might want to jot down. Yeah, that's I would probably think about that. Sounds smart. Anyway.
So how's things going on your end, Ron?
I don't know. It's just been one of those weeks. No, it was actually a very productive week. Worked on a few new models and whatnot for the lines that we'll be bringing out this year, and we'll get to see those soon. Worked on a few other things, projects and whatnot. So
teaser.
That was neat. It looked like it was blurred out, like it was censored. Did you see that, Jess?
Yeah, it's like a secret project.
It was cool. I did not do that, guys. That was just funny because apparently the blurred background thing picked up on that and blurred it out. So
That's
yes,
hilarious.
it's
That's
top
great.
secret, I guess, is what he was trying to say. So it looked like he was holding up a little vial of something. It's not, okay? So just bear with us. It
might be.
It will be revealed soon.
It's
Anyway.
10,000 hits of LSD.
You know, I don't know. I don't know what that was. It's your imagination. Run with it. Have fun. It's how conspiracy theories are started.
DMT. We're gonna go speak to the ancestors.
Speak for yourself. Anyway, how about you, Jess? You got some news? Last we heard, there was an apocalypse in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, we got through the snow apocalypse, so that was good. Last night I actually I did a little event locally at the local little tap room.
Awesome.
Bull City Cider put out a Sasquatch cider, so it's kind of like a spicy cider. So they put that out, and the local tap room here had a little event where we handed out Hellbent Holler glasses and premiered the cider at the tap room. There was live music and a lot of people came out. So it was a really nice event to go to. And it was kind of just a little collaboration thing between our local little tap room and Hellbent Holler. And we had the skinniest Bigfoot ever show up. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool that worked out. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Did you get any good pictures?
Yeah, we got a few pictures. Joe is significantly taller than our Bigfoot. So we're going to say that he was a juvenile Bigfoot. But yeah, so it was a fun little event, and it was really nice of them to invite me to come and do that.
That's awesome.
Yep. So that's Lincoln Tap Room in West Pelzer, South Carolina.
Shout out.
You can send Ron the picture of Joe and Bigfoot, and Ron can just supersize Bigfoot for you.
I can do that. Yeah, we'll do that. Anyway, let's head over to that news desk and get through this because we have a pretty crazy story that we're going to be working on tonight, right? I mean,
we got a really interesting topic tonight for you all. Good we have several witness encounters that we're actually going to be able to use tonight. So again, thanks for everybody who's contributed to that. But without further ado, let's hit this news desk. So the first kind of one that showed up in the earlier part of the week, Ron actually shared this one, and it was the authorities confirm sightings of mysterious drones over Swedish nuclear facilities.
More drones. I mean, what are you going to say? It's just more drones. Are they drones? Are they UAPs? Are they from a different, country? We don't know what these things are. We only know that they are being taken very serious at this point, right?
Yeah.
So, don't know what they are. Couldn't tell you. We're just going to have to wait and see how that story develops and move on with that.
I mean, drone technology is more accessible than ever before. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that these are civilian drones. And it's really hard to enforce a lot of these FAA type regulations. I mean, it's not FAA because it's obviously in another country, but it's really hard to kind of enforce this on small personally owned drones. But it is a possibility that these are all just drones and this could be a hoax, but it seems like we're getting a lot more frequency of this kind of happening around really, really high security areas and situations. Right. So any kind of civilian that's going to fly a drone over these areas, they are really, really taking a huge personal risk by doing that. So that kind of
they really are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They really are, and we also have, upcoming legislation. Well, we do have legislation that will go into effect very soon in the drone industry. I suggest people who are interested in that look that up. But pretty much that's kind of why they came up with this legislation, guys, is to be able to point, their trackers at these things and say, oh, that's registered to so and so. So, a double-edged sword. It's loss of freedom for the drone industry, the people who fly these things, but it's also a little bit of security The problem is, I don't think that it's just like any other registration. Not everybody's going to register these things. The only ones that really are going to matter are some of the ones like from DJI, which simply won't turn on. They just won't fire up. So you won't be able to fly those at all.
When you're within a red bubble of an area that's marked in their map, the machine actually won't fire on. It won't come.
Yeah, and it's going to be very hard to jailbreak those things too. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see how this develops and how it turns out. There's like Jess said, there's been a few of these, so we'll see how it all turns out.
So another piece of news that came out this week came from our friend Mark Marcel. He's a friend of the show here. He's interviewed us, we interviewed him rather. But he's been sitting on something for a few months. He's been working with another friend of the show, somebody that everybody else knows, James Bobo Fay, on a production series about the hairy man, Bigfoot, and all that. So Mark, if you don't know who Mark Marcel is, he's one of the guys who's researched Ape Canyon to the letter. He is the literal expert on the Ape Canyon story. And I use the word expert here solely because he really is. He knows this story inside and out. He is the lead historian on the Ape Canyon incident. He's also an expert in the sense that he is a trained and certified, highly sought after land surveyor. So he goes out and he marks property lines and boundaries and all this stuff. Well, he put all of this skill to work, and they've discovered a legendary cabin site for the old wild man stories. And they found discharged cartridges. They were able to map out and find the parameters of the building, the actual original property plot, everything, and map it out to a T. And it further lent credence to the story of what happened there because they found a bunch of cartridges. And it's a really interesting story. It's about 5 paragraphs long, and I'm going to spare you guys hearing me read it. So if you want to see it, you can head over to his page or just head over to the Wild and Weird paranormal page and group, and you can get on there and read along and follow that story as it continues to develop, because Mark's going to be posting updates as it goes, and then you're going to actually be able to watch the finished product in one of Bobo's new films. So next up on the news docket, heard there's a big space rock that's making news again, Ron.
Let's all do it together. Ready? Is everyone assume the positions?
Assume it. Got to get ready, Jess. This is the first time being a part of this,
Jess. You have to be a part of this. We've been doing this for years.
One of us.
Here we go. There we go. So maybe if we say it enough, it'll turn around and come back. There you go.
Oh, you see, that's perfect.
See, that's absolutely perfect. You have worked. You have done the magic. It's happening. No, so seriously, guys, we talked about Oumuamua before we even had Wild and Weird radio. Yeah. This thing apparently is back in the news again. Avi Loeb is adamant that this is some sort of, well, at least it's possible that it's some sort of techno signature, either an old, I guess, spacecraft, generation ship, something like that, that's just blurring around out there. But we're going to try to catch this thing now. This is the funny part, okay? It zoomed by us, it headed out, and it's been years now. And all of a sudden we're like, well, it might be a good idea to go out and catch this thing and see what it really is. So this tells us that they're actually paying attention, right? Go ahead.
Well, here's my big question. This thing left our solar system faster than it came in.
It did.
How do they expect to catch it?
I don't know, but I'm betting something has to do with Space Force. No,
you're probably right.
I don't know, guys. I'm just saying.
I feel like at this point, everybody's ready to leave the solar system and our, orbit as quickly as possible too. So, I feel the trailer park
of Earth is the trailer park of our galaxy.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm identifying with this right now.
But I totally do find it amazing that, they didn't find it is interesting to do this. And all of a sudden now, what changed again? There's that word. There's the question that I always ask: why now? What changed? And it does seem like something changed.
Yeah, something changed a little bit there. Yeah.
So we can speculate on that forever. Let's go to the next great story. And what's that one, Joe?
Well, this one kind of is a callback to last week's episode. If you guys listened to the hybrid agenda, this was an article that came out. It was on sciencealert.com, and Ron posted this one up, and it says that 9 species, and to be fair, the headline's a little misleading. It says 9 species of human once walked the earth. Now there's just one. Did we kill the rest? Well, we know that like there's a lot of other human DNA in us. Neanderthal, Denisovan. Did we just clap those cheeks until they were us? Or did we kill them? It's a possibility that we did, but we have too much DNA still floating around in us, in my opinion. What do you guys think?
Well, so here's the thing too: is it was it the Neanderthals that it seems like they had a much more narrow birth canal, and so like there was a lot of risk of dying in birth for them than it was for us. So
their entire hip girdle was way smaller than ours.
Yeah, and so like there was such a higher risk of death in childbirth, and then not even the children even making it beyond that, the mothers dying in it and everything. After a while, that's just going to completely decimate your species if you can't survive childbirth. So
right.
I think that's one small explanation for something like that.
Yeah, and it's a very sound explanation in my opinion. It's one of the things that really stands out as to why the Neanderthal also would have been crossing with us.
Yeah.
I don't have any opinion. You're all here because my people deemed you worthy. No, I'm kidding. Totally kidding. But
Ron has nothing to say about these birth canals, so we're just going to move on from there.
We're moving on.
So, Jess, you got anything for the news desk?
Yes, and it has nothing to do with aliens. So,
all right.
And that's just a short and sweet little story. So, a Pennsylvania woman found tracks outside of her house that she thought was a neighbor's dog that had gotten out in the snowstorm. So she was looking for it, and it shows up, and it's not a dog. They don't think it's a coyote. They're not sure what it is. So WRAL.com reports it as being a mystery animal. There is a wildlife rehabilitation officer who claims he can't really identify exactly what this is. To us, like Joe said, we were talking about this earlier, it looks like a coyote with mange. And so that's a simple explanation, but they've got the animal isolated right now until it can get some genetic testing to determine exactly what it is. But it does look like a coyote dog hybrid with mange, basically. But you definitely did have that little headline of Pennsylvania woman rescues mystery animal. So that'll bring you right in.
Yeah, speaking of Pennsylvania, we have another incident in Pennsylvania.
Oh, geez.
That also involves rando wildlife out there. There was a tractor trailer wreck, and unfortunately, it was full of monkeys.
Oh yeah, lab monkeys.
Lab monkeys, which makes it even better.
Yeah.
Lab
and
monkeys.
3 escaped, and they have no idea where they're at. They can't find them. Luckily, it's really freaking cold. But we don't know what species of monkey these were. We just know that there's monkeys running around in Pennsylvania from a lab carrying God knows what.
Oh, there actually was a good write-up on what they were. They had a few pictures of them finally, and at last I heard, don't quote me on absoluteness of this, but according to CNN, all of them have been captured.
See, and this is going to be one of those stories that we talk about all the time. That it's going to be one of those stories that there's no real follow-up on it, and the only follow-up is going to be like, it's fine, we took care of it.
It's all good.
We got them. Don't mind that we had to shoot them and that their blood is toxic.
Don't worry about that. Zombie monkeys ain't a thing.
Yeah, have you ever seen the movie Outbreak? I mean, no, but yeah, it's just gonna be one of those stories where he talks about ad nauseum for about a week, and then it's like, Oh yeah, that monkey escape story. Yeah, I'm sure they got them. They got them. No big deal.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are all taken care of.
Well, the scary part of it was, and I don't run with these kind of stories. I'm not one of those people who's you would think I would be, but I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, fanning the flames of paranoia like so many places and people do. I don't do that. But I will tell you this. If there was ever a perfect storm, that was it. I mean, first of all, they were coming from Florida. There was rumors that they were involved in corona research. So we are talking about a potential
Nothing good comes from this
apocalyptic scenario 28 days later kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So hopefully they did catch them. And, I saw a lot of people on some of these boards. They were like, oh, those poor monkeys. I'm thinking, oh, those poor humans.
Right.
If they don't catch these monkeys. I mean, I'm all good. I mean, you know as well as I do. We've fought for animal rights for years.
Yep, we have.
Literally fought for animal rights.
So
went to the steps and did it. So
we know where these lab monkeys come from for the most part.
So if we sit here and say, I hope they got them, there's a reason that we say we hope they got them.
There's a primate experiment. There's a lab where they experiment on primates off the coast of South Carolina. It's close to the Georgia line, which goes right into Florida from there. And there's been several reports of people coming up that interstate that is right near where that is and having large apes like cross the road. And like people mistake them for like Bigfoot sightings sometimes. But it's right by where that lab is. So I think a lot more of these primates escape on a regular basis than the media would let you know or the news will let you know. Because there's been so many reports of people coming up that interstate and a monkey just runs across. So,
Well, I heard the last one that they caught, he actually identified himself. I think his name was Caesar.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
So, anyway, what else we got, Joe?
We've got one last one before we leave the news desk and dive into our main topic tonight, and that is the news that came out from SpaceX and Tesla, and some stuff from Elon Musk talking about his role in artificial general intelligence. And how he is developing these robots to go and work on Mars and build the colony on Mars. But don't worry, these robots will be completely safe and there's no chance that they can kill us. And some of the settings that are featured is the fact that they can only run at 5 miles an hour, which it might not sound that bad, but eventually humans have to stop running. Well, 5 miles an hour will, it's the tortoise and the hare kind of race. You can out sprint it and you'd better hide, but this thing doesn't get tired. So,
well, it's kind of like zombies do that, right?
Right.
Robo zombies.
I mean, there's comic books and movies and all this stuff about why
this
shouldn't be a bad idea.
But for you guys who really want to know more about it, we did a really good episode on artificial intelligence.
We did.
And a threat to humanity. And it was really a good one, probably one of the best ones to tackle that we've done. But I'll read just one part of this because I think this is important. Elon Musk announced that he is thinking about involving Tesla in the creation of artificial general intelligence, also added the plan on decentralizing the control of the Tesla bots to avoid a Terminator-like scenario. That's all I need to say. Yeah, Joe, you're absolutely right. I think that he is, he's kind of trying to sugarcoat the fact that these things, they can be potentially dangerous. I mean, I think we covered the fact that they absolutely can be dangerous. He's sugarcoating it, in my opinion, because he needs these robots to help build this million-some people, colony, the first colony on Mars. Because let's be real, it's going to be a lot of work, and the people they're taking up there just aren't cut out for this, in my opinion.
Yeah, the short list for this Mars project does not sound like the people that I would be sending on my Mars mission.
No. I mean, to be honest with you, quite a few of them are going to die on Mars. Just pretty soon, pretty quick, I think, after they get there. Let's be real. This is the Oregon Trail. Okay? This is the Oregon Trail. So if they haven't played that, they need to probably do that. You guys,
Yeah, you might want to try.
go play that.
I always really appreciate when professionals and geniuses always make references to Terminator. I really appreciate a good Terminator reference when talking about artificial intelligence and robots that could possibly take over the world and murder us all. So good on that one.
Well, it's either Terminator or Cylons. You take your pick. It's all the same end result, pretty much. So, we create something that destroys us. There you go, or hunts us down. But anyway, that's the news, guys. Until, next week, we'll see what happens then. But always check the Wild and Weird Talk page and just try to stay up to date with it, because there's a lot of news. If we use your story, we'll also mention you over here. If you find a really good story you think that we can use, please post it up there, and we'll read it off and give you some credit.
Yep.
All right, Joe, take us into this timey-wimey weird stuff.
Well, this topic is really strange, and it's always intrigued me. I think even before my fascination with cryptozoology, because I had this weird obsession with time travel as a kid. Like, I thought that was just going to be the coolest thing in the world. But it also, this time slips aren't necessarily time travel. Now, time travel kind of can play into this whole mess because we don't really know what's going on. It's a very bizarre phenomenon. And there are people around the world that are experiencing these bizarre happenings with time, and there's seemingly no answer for them. They're really fun to talk about, though, so that's what we're going to do tonight. And I myself have actually had a few of these random instances, some that occurred in the sense where I was actually on the phone with my wife an hour and 15 minutes from the house. The entire time I was driving, I was on the phone with my wife, and when I pulled in the front door, it was only like 38 minutes that we had been on the phone.
Oh, there's a few that you've had, actually.
Yeah.
One I remember in particular that was very strange that you will no doubt talk about.
Yeah. I was going to get into that one here once we started talking about some of the other maybe time dilations at that point.
That's more like what we're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, because that one was really odd. So when we start talking about time slips, to give you guys a little bit of a insight, if you've not heard of this topic before, what it is essentially you see something that is out of time. Now, that doesn't mean that a clock stopped somewhere, but it means that you are either looking in the location that might have been 2,000 years ago, 1 million years ago, 65 million years ago, or, 250 years in the future. These things don't really have rules to them, it doesn't seem. But people have tried to use the time slip theory, the time slip phenomena, to attribute to some of these out-of-place dinosaur sightings, like the pterosaurs or the Mokalabembe. Nessie has even been attributed to time slips, where you are looking into a past world that is bleeding into this timeline. Now, we all know that if you've ever studied any kind of research about time and the stuff that's been coming out here in the last decade, you know that time isn't exactly linear, and Doctor Who was the first to call that out, that it was this weird garbled bundle of just circular and spirally motion. It wasn't just a straight line. Now, with that said, would that make it possible, if we start looking at quantum physics, to see these areas of time bleed over? What do you guys think?
Theoretically, yeah. I think theoretically, absolutely, what you just said. I mean, why can't two or more things exist? And you're not even considering the possibility of, what science is going to at this point, multi-dimensions, multiverses.
Exactly. It might not even be this dimension. It could be another dimension bleeding in.
Yeah. We could be talking about kind of I don't know if you guys ever watched the show back in the day, Sliders.
Yeah, Sliders was a good one.
Well, Sliders was a real good one because it was based on a physics at the time that people thought, oh, that's just science fiction. But, we're kind of seeing that now, that these universes can exist with these slight variances, at least hypothetically. In theory, they can exist. And we haven't proved it, in actual reality. But imagine that, and then imagine those kind of phasing in and phasing out. You would get kind of this sense of the same place, but something will be a little different,
Well, You guys both have experience in this and can probably talk about it a little bit. There are some theories that these time slips could also be what causes haunted houses or haunted locations or strange energies being in places that they shouldn't be. Like you said, something just doesn't feel right. But
so instead of time being like in a straight line, it would almost be like it's folded, and layered on top of one another.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like all of time happening all at once at the same time.
Yeah. We've all seen the the demonstration where they take the paper and they fold it, from point A to point B, right? And it shows, well, what that's also showing is not just showing a warp. People, this is the A to B. So they're kind of always using this to demonstrate a wormhole.
Right.
But you're also showing that these two times are coexisting. Or these two things are coexisting, right? Once they're pushed together, they're coexisting. So imagine the implication of what you just said there. What if one thing isn't quite right in this one and something is in this one? It drives you nuts to really think about that kind of stuff. And you really think, you're just overthinking this. It's just science fiction. Until you listen to some of these accounts.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
I have a really, really cool story that I've been obsessed with when it comes to, you were mentioning earlier, Joe, about that a lot of these hauntings and things like that seem like they may be some sort of layering of time, that it's people existing in different planes of time, but it's all existing in the same place. Have either of you heard, I'm sure you have, of the Dawdleston messages?
Yes.
So, would you guys mind if I talked a little bit about that?
Go for it. That fits this perfectly.
Yeah, so that's why you were like talking about paranormal and ghostly things and haunted. I was like, okay, this is like right on the money with that. The Dawdleston messages. So this is in England. It happened in 1984. There were 3 roommates that were living in this really, really, really old cottage, and one of the roommates, Ken, was I think he was a professor at a local university. And of course, it's 1984, so computers are not very common. Household computers are almost unheard of. So they had a BBC microprocessor, and his school would let him bring it home on the weekends to work on and use and everything like that. Well, the 3 roommates, which was Ken, Debbie, and Nicola, they were coming home one day, and there was a light in the window, and it was the green screen of the BBC processor. And Ken ran inside. He wanted to make sure it was off because you don't want to run it too long. It's, this is like first generation computer. You don't want to run it too long. This is an expensive piece of equipment. We've got to turn it off, So he runs in there and he looks at the screen, and on the screen is this entire like poem that is typed out. And it's kind of a weird, I have it here. It's very weird and it's almost ominous. And Ken didn't do this, Nicola didn't do this, Debbie didn't do this. It was just on the screen when they all came home. And it said, "True are the nightmares of a person that fears. Safe are the bodies of the silent world. Turn, pretty flower, turn towards the sun, for you shall grow and sow. But the flower reaches too high and withers in the burning light." And that was the first one that came through. That was the first message that came through on this computer. And so turned it off. That's weird. They made note of it and everything like that. Well, as the story goes, as time goes on, a lot more weird things start to happen. So on the walls inside the cottage, there were these 6-toed footprints that were like spindly, and they were going up the wall and then they would disappear into the ceiling. And they painted over them. They just thought, well, this is a really, really old cottage. Maybe it's just an old stain on the wall. They painted over them, and then the footprints came through the paint again. So that was really, and that's so weird, right? Another thing that would happen is cans, bottles, and other like household items. They would come home and they would find all these household items stacked up almost like 4 feet high all over the house. And so you've got a lot of what seems like poltergeist activity going on. You've got these strange messages coming through the computer. You've got these footprints. So it's kind of like all over the place with this.
Yeah.
So then keep going on. Later on, there was a file on the computer, and it was titled Reate. And so Ken opened up the file, and it had a really, really weird message in there. And the message was written in, it was in English, but it was weird. There's a lot of E's. There's a lot of must confess that I hath also been, a lot of stuff in there. And it's a really long thing. And they talk about devils and all kinds of things in it. So he took it to somebody at his university and had them take a look at it. And they were like, okay, Ken, this is old English. Like, this is old English. So they, that's really weird because Ken had no idea what this was. He didn't know about this. And it was like spot on. So the roommates started like just interacting with this entity that kept coming through this computer. And throughout like interacting with them, they found out that this is a entity who's, well, not even an entity at this point. He claims he's a man whose name is Lucas, and he is in the year 1521, and he's communicating with them through the computer, that he lives in that cottage, that he lives there, and he is communicating with them in real time, and they're communicating with him in real time. So this is kind of like that folded time theory, that they're all in the same location, but it's all happening at different times, but at the same time.
But somehow they're able to use the technology to communicate. And it's
the
really
ghost is in the machine,
and it's not much different though than people going out with a ghost box or novelists or anything like that today. It's the same principle. That's what they're looking for.
And so the roommates, they were talking to them, and they mentioned that they were in the year 1984. And the Lucas person was shocked to hear that because he thought that they were a part of the 2109 collective. So he had been communicating with somebody from the year 2109 and people from 1984. So you've got this triple kind of like layering of time in that. So the Lucas person from the 1500s, he mentioned that people in his village were starting to get very suspicious of him because he was communicating with devils. So they thought that he was performing witchcraft and communicating with devils. And then after he mentions that, shortly after that, all communication with Lucas just completely dies. So they don't know what happened to Lucas, if he was, if he was executed for witchcraft, which was very common in the day, or what happened there. And they never heard anything about the 2109 collective anymore after that. So this is a really famous story of kind of that semi-haunting, semi-layering of time that you were mentioning earlier.
I think it's the same thing, guys. You're talking about using instruments to do that. It's ITC, like Joe said. That's what that is. It's what is it? Instrumental transcommunication. So that's basically the concept of like EVPs, all that stuff that we do today, and it is more on the what they would call an intelligent haunt, right?
Yeah.
So your time slips, on the other hand, are typically something that would fall more into the residual type haunt, where something just happens over and over again, or is seen to happen, or like we're sitting here doing this podcast. We may phase out of existence for a bit and appear in someone else's reality in the future in the same place, which is exactly what you just said that this guy did. So it's built upon the theory that all time literally exists at once.
Now,
everything.
Speaking about phasing out of that reality and into a new one, one of my favorite cases around time slips happens to take place in a national park that I've actually been to a couple of times, and it's Bodie National Park. It's an old ghost town in California. It was an old gold town, right? Well, you drive up and park, and you walk in maybe a little bit less than a quarter mile before you get into where the actual ghost town is, but everything is literally left as it was the day that everybody left town. Once the gold dried up, there are remains of canned food still setting in the grocery store aisles that they had set up. There's still in the lumberyard, where the lumberyard was, the saws are all still setting there. They didn't bother taking them with them or taking them apart. They just left them. And these there were some visitors who took their family out for a vacation. They were walking around and they thought they'd come up on a bunch of reenactors, which doesn't happen at Bodie. Like, the only people who are dressed in period clothes are the occasional tour guide that comes through. You never get the whole town full of people and actually working where the general store is functional. You can go buy stuff at the general store. They went and bought candy at the general store, and they were using coins instead of dollars because that's all it cost. You didn't have to break a dollar. Oh, I've got a change purse, I can just use my coins, that kind of deal. And I guess that didn't take off weird with whoever was taking the money. I'm not sure that, but you would think that would take weird with the general store keep. But anyway, they're walking around the town. They're viewing everything the way it was when it was bustling, when everything was going in its prime. They were seeing all the stores and all the people, the horses that were tied up outside the saloon and outside of the various shops and everything. And they just thought that this was just a big reenactment. And once they got back to their vehicles and turned back and looked, everything was completely the way it was when I went. Desolate buildings just standing there that looked like they've been weathered by the desert sun and sand. And they experienced something completely different. They were in a lively town, a lively small town, and thought that this was some big to-do. Then they get back to their car and find out that, whoa, what just happened?
Completely different reality.
Yep.
Yeah. And we see this, there are several famous cases, and one of them involved the Bermuda Triangle. I'll go ahead and read that one to you. That was the Gernon story, the Bruce Gernon story. Very popular with a lot of people who grew up watching Unsolved Mysteries, In Search of, etc. This was a really good story. Basically, he is, I'll just go ahead and read it. According to Gernon, he departed Andros Island in the Bahamas at 3 p.m. December 4th, 1970, in a Bonanza A36. That's his plane. He takes off flying. He approaches a cloud. The exterior of this cloud is white and fluffy and harmless, so Gernon continues on ahead. But once inside, the interior was revealed to be dark with flashes of light indicating they may have entered a dangerous electrical storm. At 3:27 p.m., Gernon turned the plane 135 degrees, headed south in an attempt to break free from the cloud. At this point, Gernon radioed to Miami to notify them of the change in the course. Gernon attempted to flee the second cloud, and he discovered, to his dismay, that the first cloud he escaped now appeared to be connected with this secondary cloud. So there's two clouds, and they form a tunnel, basically, is what happens. His plane goes down the center of this tunnel. He estimates this cloud to be 10 to 15 miles long, by the way, and he can clearly see it. He flies through this thing. Now, while inside the tunnel, Gernon noticed that there were spiraling lines swirling in counterclockwise motions along the interior. Okay? If nothing tells you to get out of the cloud, I mean,
right?
I don't know, but he continues on.
Weird lines in the cloud,
yep.
making strange movements. I'm out.
It's good. He continues on in this cloud while the vortex of energy is around him, right? So now the plane, it appears to be 10 to 15 miles long. Well, Gernon could see blue sky at the other end of the tunnel and decided the safest course of action was now to carry on forward through the tunnel. As the plane progresses forward, the opening of the tunnel seems now to be continuously shrinking in both length and diameter. What seemed like a 10-mile tunnel at first that should have taken roughly 3 minutes to pass through became a 1-mile long tunnel that they passed through in 20 seconds. Sound familiar, Joe?
Yeah.
As the plane crossed the edge of the tunnel, its passengers experienced a sensation of weightlessness that lasted 10 seconds. Instead of a clear blue sky Gernon first had seen through the tunnel, they were met with a blank gray haze all around them. No sky, no ocean, no horizon, absolutely nothing but grayness. Gernon describes it as resembling a thick fog, except for the fact that the visibility appeared to be extended roughly 2 miles. When they attempted to read the location via the magnetic electronic navigational systems, they discovered the instruments were malfunctioning. Gernon contacted Miami Air Traffic Control again to seek assistance in identifying the location via radar. However, Miami claimed that there were absolutely no planes visible on radar anywhere near Miami, Bimini, and Andros. Gernon did his best to steer the plane toward the destination with nothing to go on but his own mental compass. After a few minutes, Miami Radio Control announced that he had just spotted the plane directly over Miami heading west. Gernon did not believe that the plane the controller saw was theirs because they had only been flying for 34 minutes, and there was no way he could have reached Miami in that amount of time. Now, it goes on for a few more, but basically he lands and they find out that not only have they managed somehow to be ahead of time, the fuel in the craft validated that. So this isn't like, someone said, oh, I think it was, we were there for 20, No, there was actually hard proof that this happened. Somehow they estimated that his plane had to be flying somewhere around 3,000 miles per hour to get to where it was in that time. And the top speed of this aircraft was about 300 miles per hour.
And what you were saying with hard proof was communication with towers.
Towers and the fact that, the fuel.
Yeah, fuel consumption.
Fuel consumption. So something happened to that flight. This is one of the most famous ones, simply because, there is actual evidence.
There's hard data.
Yeah.
Now, this phenomenon is also something that's been studied widely by academics as well as military facilities. Surprise. So, in Montauk at Camp Hero, which, if you guys have heard, if Montauk sounds familiar, you might be thinking of the Montauk Monster, that weird critter that washed up on the beach that was bloated and lost all of its hair and just looked weird, and probably a big bloated raccoon, but who knows. But Montauk was also, or is also, a big research facility. And it was a huge research facility all through the Cold War and continuing into the current day. But some of the stuff that they worked on at Montauk was mind control, telepathy, time travel, and wormholes.
Things that bordered science fiction.
Yeah. But this was actually something that they were actively pursuing. Just recently in the news, remember, there is this warp bubble that we spoke about a few weeks back. Yep. that they have discovered. Who's to say they didn't do something with a weird warp bubble at Montauk back then? But this phenomena, the one that specifically the one that you mentioned with the aircraft, that one was one of my favorites because there's so much data that you can actually look at that doesn't match up. It doesn't make sense. There's no reason for anything to have happened the way it did. Now, I'm going to share with you guys a weird instance. This is the one that we were talking about with the time dilation, because I want to start getting into some of that stuff here as well. This is something that actually happened to me. And my wife and I talked about it again today, just before we came down here to record, because it involved both of us. And I contacted Ron, and as soon as everything happened, I called Ron. This was shortly after my wife and I got married, and we were at our apartment, or I was at our apartment. I got off work a little early, and I'd come home, and I was cleaning up the house and taking out the trash. Well, as I was taking out the trash, I see Kelly driving down the driveway. So I wave at her. She doesn't even see me from my point of view. She doesn't see me at all. Drives right on by, and I'm like, oh, okay, she must have had a bad day. So I just proceed to go carry the trash, because where I live, just to set the scene, the dumpster was about, 2,000 feet from where my dwelling was. And I had to go down 3 flights of stairs and then those 2,000 feet to the dumpster. So through this period, this is when, Kelly just drives by and ignores me, and I'm like, well, bad day, or she's mad at me, I missed a message or something, I'll hear about it in a minute. So I go up the steps or I take the trash out and then walk back, go up the steps and go back inside. And when I go back inside, I walk back to the bedroom, I change my clothes, and I come back out, and Kelly freaks out. Like, just, I saw Kelly sitting on the couch playing on her phone. I walked by, I said, "Hey," no response at all. And I was like, okay. So I went and changed clothes, and I was like, I'll just, get my work clothes off and then go talk to her, figure out what's going on. When I come back out the hallway, she freaks out, just wigs out. Where did you come from? Because she had already been back in the bedroom to change clothes. Didn't see me. I wasn't back there at that time. So in my head, I'm piecing this all together. But then she's like, "No, I've been home for like 30 minutes. And I'm like, "I just saw you drop by when I took out the trash." She was like, "Nobody was walking by when I took out the trash." Because it's a big wide open area. There's nothing that would have obscured me. She would have had to see me. Well, when I showed the best way that we can explain this, because I actually went to Ron's house and Ron performed a mild hypnotic regression, I guess you would call it.
Like you do.
As you do, because
as one does on a Tuesday afternoon,
in such strange occurrences. Actually, all I did was have you relax and you just sort of.
Yeah. It wasn't really a hypnosis. Like there was no watch the spinning circle or follow my watch. It was none of that. I just laid down on the couch and he started walking me through some stuff and I relaxed and calmed down. And then he had me think back on it, and man, was that a trip. So essentially what we gathered happened was something happened, because now here's the kicker with all of this. The trash actually got taken out. So whether the trash is in our dimension or I just took my trash and yeeted it into another dimension, I'll never know.
That would be a handy skill to have, is to be able to just yeet the trash into another dimension.
Right?
I think that would kind of help out the landfill situation that we have here.
Yeah. So this action, and there's another instance that happened several years later that involved a task. The task was still completed. So we'll get into that in a minute. So I go back and I talk to Ron, and Ron walks me through the relaxing stuff and then just has me start thinking back on what happened. And I remember when I was thinking back on it, I'm like, I didn't walk down the stairs. I just phased through the stairs down to the ground, and then phased through the cars that I was walking. Like as I was walking to the trash can, all the parked cars that I would have had to have walked around, like I didn't make the normal path. Like I walked a straight line through the parked vehicles and all that stuff, and just, made my way through. And then Kelly didn't see me. So whatever I was doing, I was not in the same, I guess, bubble or spectrum maybe that she was on, because she really didn't see me. And then when I went back up to the house, I phased back through the stairs and didn't even open the door. I phased through the door, then went back, changed clothes, and my clothes were on the floor in the bedroom.
No, to be fair, what you're trying to say when you say phased it, you were just there. These are big gaps in the memory that you're just kind of putting in and saying, well, obviously I had to phase there because I don't have anything here, but they're just black spots.
There were black spots.
No
there wasn't like, I wasn't like watching myself phase through these objects.
I just want to clear that for everybody else.
I know what good catch.
Yeah. Because that's basically what he's saying is, this is what we get with missing Tom.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's probably not what this was. This was something completely different.
And obviously, this is not just an instance of you like on autopilot and not paying attention to what you're doing.
No.
Going through the motions of something and kind of just not being there fully mentally,
When I was thinking
he's
back on
not there fully mentally.
Well, that's more than usual, I guess.
Yes.
When we were thinking back on it and I was reflecting on what took place, everything looked a different shade. It wasn't like a typical memory. Everything kind of looked like a gray version of sepia, I guess.
Yep.
And
lighting was off. That's what you said.
Yeah. And so the lighting was off, and that's what it felt like. So then when I walked out of the bedroom,
outside as well, as I recall, that you shouldn't have been able to see.
Right, there was smoke too. There was like weird smoke and fog on the ground and weird stuff that shouldn't have been there, because it was like, early spring and like 75 degrees. There wasn't fog or any reason for fog to be on the ground or any kind of weird smoke and objects.
Yep.
So then Kelly sees me, freaks out, and like I found out that roughly at least 30 minutes had passed, if not more, because she had been home for half an hour already and had gone back, changed clothes, and she was waiting on me to get home from work. She saw my van parked outside, but thought that it might have just been some other work van, because I drove at the time a unmarked white van that, there's thousands of everywhere. So that happened. Then when we first bought the house that we live in currently, this has been about 4 years ago now, I was out cleaning out the flower garden.
This is my favorite one.
In the summer. And something very similar happened. Now, I never noticed any kind of change until suddenly we had ordered some packages from Amazon, and those were being delivered, and I was just outside working. It was hot. It was like, 80, 90 degrees. So I'm outside. I've just got like my shorts on, no shirt, and work boots and work gloves. So I'm out here, the great white creature that glares sunlight that is very difficult to miss in a green garden. And what snaps me is I hear this sudden brrr. Well, that was the engine of the postman's vehicle, those old natural gas vehicles. And I turned around and like I didn't hear it drive up on me. It was just suddenly there. And then I hear my gate slam, because I have a spring-loaded gate at my front door, and I hear the gate slam shut. And then I raise up and I'm like, whoa, like that. And then the postmaster yelled, or the delivery person, not the postmaster, the mail delivery lady says, whoa. And I'm like, what? And she's like, where the hell did you come from? Like, scared. And I was like, I've been here the whole time. Where'd you come from? And she's like, I drove up here and you weren't here. And I'm like, I've been right here the whole time. And she's like, no, you weren't. I would have seen you. Because I'm like, mind you, at the time, it was before I'd lost weight. So I was like 285 pounds of bright white human flesh out there. And
that's a hot picture I really want to get out of my head right now.
Yeah, you're all welcome for that. And I'm 6'3", so I'm, not an easy object to miss. And so that was just really weird. But again, the task was completed. Whatever I was out there doing, like when I was weeding the garden and taking care of all this stuff out, like all of this, chore got done.
There was a weird thing about this one was there was after effects, as I recall.
There were. I had really bad headaches.
Bad headaches. You felt terrible.
I almost passed out.
Yeah.
It was really weird because whenever I came back in, like I was super dehydrated, and I felt really lightheaded and almost threw up, and then almost passed out, and then I had a migraine that lasted for about a day and a half.
That's right. Yeah. So these things, and apparently we've had other people who've come forward and told us the same things.
We have, we'd put that out there today on the talk page, and we'd asked if anybody had any kind of weird time slip, time dilation stories that they would like to share, and they didn't mind for us to share here, to just chime in. And we had a lot of feedback come in. One of them was during a trip to New York, and this came from Brittany Nicole. This took place in 2018. She was in her vehicle driving along the Hudson River. because they're from upstate New York. And this trip should have been about a 25-minute trip. And she says that 10 minutes into their ride, she was casually talking to her mom while she was driving. She stopped and pulled over and quickly started freaking out. When her mom finally calmed down enough to tell me what was going wrong, she did it nonchalantly because they had kids in the car that was 5, 9, and 9. And she started towards the destination. She said that they were on the right track, but as they were pulled over, she realized that the river was on their left, which was basically the wrong side that they were supposed to be on. And that this was that they hadn't crossed the river. They'd only driven straight. And this is a very familiar area. This is where they're from, very populated. And that they'd only been driving maybe 10 minutes. And that she said, I didn't truly think anything was really wrong until I realized that the time on my phone we had lost, in quotations, 45 minutes. And we just ended up continuing on driving in the direction that we were already facing and took the kids to go get lunch while we shook off what happened. So they wound up on the wrong side of the river without crossing a bridge. They're having this weird time loss sensation. It's just really weird. And it was a whole car full of people that experienced
this. These instances are always very, very interesting when you have multiple people in the same location experiencing the same kind of time slip or time dilation. When it's a whole group of people experiencing it, that just adds to the credibility of it, that it's so strange. And so, it makes it even more unexplainable. But again, if you're just phasing out, or if you're under the influence of something, or if you're, doing, you just forget what you're doing or something like that, or you have your mind slips, that's you as one person. But when you have multiple people involved in this kind of experience, it's really, really just lends to the credibility of these things are actually happening to people.
Yeah.
Makes it very hard to
rationalize.
Ignore. Yeah, you really, this is, it's something going on.
So Morgan Jackson had an encounter that she also shared on the page, and I'm going to read that off to you now. She says that her friend and I went on a vacation the past year, touring various parts of the state of West Virginia. We had a quick lunch and left around 1:30 and began hiking down the river, looking at various rocks and picking up pieces of driftwood. I even had a particular stick with a knife on it hiking with me that I set upright between the rocks and made sure it was pretty sturdy. We decided to crawl through some rocks and driftwood that somewhat reminds you of an arch. Once we crawled through and reached the other side, we both began acting kind of confused and stumbling on rocks. I even fell, and the dog we had with us began acting irrationally, as if she couldn't climb over the rocks, and even just kind of hung on to me for a minute or two, just looking around confused. We both noticed it appeared visibly later in the day than what it should have been. There calls back to that weird light shift. When looking at the sun, we even noticed that the mountains around us oddly looked kind of fake and reflective around us. I tried finding my stick with the knife and eventually found it laying down, moved to a different location in the river. We checked the time, and it was after 7, and it took us less than 30 minutes to get back to camp from the arch area. We left at 1:30, and we assumed we got to the arch around 2:15 to 2:30 because we walked slower on the way looking at rocks and sticks. But somewhere several hours disappeared, and it was 7-ish o'clock. We should have been back at camp by 3:30 or 4 at the pace we were going. So this is another weird instance where you have that the light looks different, the light's off.
Time's not
right. Just something kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you guys think about that?
I think it sounds absolutely like every one of these cases. There's something to this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm convinced there's something to this. This is not just, as the skeptics would say, well, the witness is simply mistaken. They're, like Jess says, they're on autopilot. They They just happen to remember it as this. Their mind has this blank area where they kind of phased out, and so they fill in this space. No, it's not that. There's too many of these.
Yeah.
I mean, there are stories, like the one I had found. I sent you guys some stories, and I'm going to put these in the thing. There's the ghost train story. That's a great story. I'm going to put that in the link because it's really long and you really need to watch it. It's from another podcast. Watch it. They do a really good story, really good representation of that. One of the other most famous ones, though, was Brennan Goddard, another pilot. This time, this guy's flying over an airfield, and it was in
the Goddard incident is really interesting.
Yes,
that one is really, really cool because it, like you said, this is a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
It's in this field, it's what we call a credible witness. Not that the average Joe is a non-credible witness, but typically pilots, police officers, military are trained observers.
Yep.
So also, these are people who have they're professionals. They have a career. When they come out with a story like this, they're sticking their reputation on this story, and it's obviously something so serious that they would stake their reputation on that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, his story is amazing because basically he leaves over the airfield. He's over Edinburgh. He ran into some trouble on his flight though home and decided to fly back to Drim to get his bearings. All right, so he's flying around. He's like, okay, I'm gonna figure out where I'm at. I'm good. Upon his return though, heavy rain abruptly changed the bright sunlight. Pay attention to that part again. Here's that fog, that haze, the dark, whatever. The airfield was in full working condition. The mechanics were all in blue overalls. They were presiding over 4 yellow planes on the runway. He could see these planes as he flew over the field. None of which Goddard recognized, by the way, despite his vast aviation experience. He didn't land. He just kept on and never spoke of this incident to anyone. 4 years later, the RAF started painting their planes yellow, and the mechanics were wearing blue uniforms. So the theory is this guy actually hopped into the future and back. So again, this is one of those things that it had to be someone else maybe, but he has some specifics here. He saw planes that didn't exist. He didn't recognize them. 4 years later, he recognizes them. He's still on the base. He gets to see this stuff come too. So that is to me, I don't know. You've got two choices. Either it's fake or it's real. And I'm sorry, I think this stuff's real.
It seems like a lot of times with this aviation stuff and these naval situations, there's always this description of a fog or a mist or a cloud or something like that obscures your vision while you're doing this transference of time. In the story of the Philadelphia experiment, they talk about a green fog coming through the area when they actually attempted. So with the Philadelphia experiment, it was the USS Eldridge, and it was allegedly an attempt to cloak the USS Eldridge, and they were going to do it by bending light to cloak it using electricity. And what happened is apparently the ship was sent through some sort of time warp of some kind. There's stories that there were the sailors were mad when they came back, or they were at part of the ship, and all kinds of crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, some of the more graphic descriptions are really weird, where you've got body parts that are fused into the hull of the ship and all kinds of other weird stuff. So this story comes from a friend of ours and friend of the show, Les Odell. Some of you West Virginia folk and some folks around Appalachia might actually recognize his name. Les is one of the founders of West Virginia Case. So Les says, several years ago when I was young, about 12, I would spend days in the wilderness alone during summer break. At this point in my life, one of my favorite things to do was hiking to the top of ridge lines a couple miles from home and set up camp in preparation for a week-long stay. During my time out, I would walk the same trail along the ridge, foraging for wild edibles like nuts and berries. I also would hike the ridge line to an old farm pond at the head of the hollow where I would catch fish for dinner. While traversing the ridge, I always used the same trail between my camp and the pond, never veering off course. I knew the trail like the back of my hand, every rock, every tree, every bit of ground foliage. However, there was a specific day where I remember being about halfway to the pond and noticed things were very different. The trees seemed different. The ground foliage was very noticeably different. It was almost like I was in a completely different forest, almost rainforest-like. As I stood in confusion looking around, I noticed that there were no sounds, no chirping birds, no chattering of squirrels or chipmunks, and then it hit me. I could not hear the wind. Even though I could feel it on my skin and I could see swaying in the trees, at this moment, I became unsettled, borderline panicking. As the feeling of panic grew, I began running blindly back towards my camp. Within a few seconds, I realized I was back in a familiar area. Then I stopped. Looking around as I caught my breath, I tried to make sense of what just happened. That's when it hit me. I was able to hear all the usual sounds again. During the following days, I would walk the same trail several times, but never found an area remotely like what I'd seen days prior. Nor did I ever have an experience like that day in my numerous adventures of that area throughout my teenage years. So that's a really strange happening. You know, it's almost like he stepped into a different forest at some point. Was it back in time? Was it into the future? We don't know. There was nothing really to gauge that off of, but it's a really, really interesting testimony. So we've covered time dilations. We've covered time slips. We've covered some other stuff. Let's get into some other timey-wimey stuff and talk a little bit about time travelers. So, Jess, I know you've got one for us.
Yeah, there's a lot of notable people who claim to be time travelers that kind of pop up through any kind of research you do through this.
We're going to do an episode solely on one of those guys, which everybody knows for sure. Are you getting ready to talk about John?
No.
Okay. Well, we're going to do an episode in the future dedicated to John Titor. That's why he's not coming up in this episode. So brace yourself, because that one is a really wild ride.
Yeah.
So Jess, go ahead.
No, this is a little more. This is a little bit on the B side here. This is a deep cut. Okay.
Nice.
So when we were talking about doing, time travelers, time slips, anything like that, I was reminded of, so like when I go to sleep at night, I usually play old episodes of Coast to Coast AM. I find Art Bell very soothing. So
Nice.
There's an episode from July of 1998. It was an open lines episode, and he would do those often where he would have different themes for the open lines and stuff like that. So, are you, ghosts or time travelers was this particular one. If you're a time traveler, call the open line and come and talk to me. So, Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. So this one was very, very interesting because this guy called in and he was unflappable, absolutely unflappable. He was having a discussion with Art and he answered questions right off the bat. Everything was on point. Callers called in and Art even tried to trip him up a few times. And he was like, no, not that. He would correct Art and Art would be like, oh, yeah. And he was doing it on purpose, of course.
That was one of the great things about Art Bell's interview style.
Yeah.
I loved Art's interview style.
Yeah, there will never ever be anybody like Art Bell on this planet, or any other. So this is the story of Single 7. So that is what he was referred to as Single 7 or Jonathan. And so Single 7 was supposed to be his rank. He claims he was a time traveler from the year 2063, and he was inspired to call in and discuss this after the tsunami in Papua New Guinea. So he saw the destruction of the tsunami in Papua New Guinea and decided he would call in because he needed to warn everyone about what was going on and what was happening. So, like I said, he claimed to be from the year 2063, which is not too far in the future, but it's far enough to where what he's talking about seems very, very plausible. So he claims he was a member of a TravT group, which is a travel time group, and that each person in his group had a they all have different jobs that they're doing. So they're traveling back in time because they have a mission to heat the Earth because there is a group of what we would refer to as alien greys called the NYM, that are trying to take over the Earth in the future. In the year 2063, what's left of humanity is at war with the NYM to prevent them from taking over our Earth. So the NYM have to live in a colder, darker environment. So the plan for the one world government and who's left of humanity is to travel back in time and heat the Earth. That way it's inhospitable to the NYM. And so part of doing that is going to, because they have teams that travel back in time that are the weather control teams. And what he says they do is they come back and they use EMPs to cause geological events like the eruption of volcanoes, earthquakes, things like that, that will cause volcanic activity, which will raise the temperature of the ocean, that will eventually raise the temperature of the ice caps, melt those. And their whole goal is to get the Earth's temperature on average up over 15 degrees. And that way that it's completely inhospitable to the NYM at that point. So he went through all of this, and this guy says he's not a weather control guy. He doesn't do that. He just kind of knows what they do. He says that he is a paleo agriculture tech. So his job was to come back into time and gather up the non-hybridized versions of corn seeds, tomatoes, and wheat, and kind of get those non-hybridized versions that can survive in warmer temperatures. Because by the time we're getting to 2063, with all of the GMOs and hybrid seeds and everything like that, the crops are just not going to survive in that temperature raise. And again, think about this. This is this entire conversation occurred in 1998. It's not something occurring right now where climate change and GMOs and all of this stuff is on the forefront of the news and what people are thinking about. This is a conversation that occurred in 1998. So, and basically, this is a mission that they're doing to save humanity.
He was trying to get some of that pre-Monsanto corn.
Yes, he was. But so what caused him to become a rogue agent and tell people about this is he saw the tsunami in Papua New Guinea, and it struck him that what they're doing is killing millions of people, and he morally could not live with that. So the whole goal was to, if you kill millions now and throughout the next, tens of years, that you can save what's little left of humanity in the future. So it's a sacrificing of millions now and through the next few years to save what little bit of humanity has survived in the future fighting the NYM. So, but it's a very, very interesting listen, and it's really, really cool to listen to it, and just like all these little details and all of these little things he'll say, and he answers questions immediately, and Art will bring up like little bits and pieces of history that is relevant now or relevant in 1998, and he goes, I'm sorry, I learned a little bit about that in history, but I don't really know about that. But then when Art mentioned crop circles, he goes, now crop circles, are you growing crops in circles? He goes, I'm an ag tech, so I would love to know what you guys are talking about with the crop circles. They're like, oh, no. It's about aliens coming and putting circles in the crops. He goes, no, that's not what I'm interested in. I was sorry. So, but what's really cool about it is it is such a good listen. It is it's an hour and I think 45 minutes. And it is just he's absolutely unflappable. And we'll have to drop
a link to that in the descriptor for the episode. So that way everybody can go listen.
I'm sure you can find it. I think you can find it on YouTube. But there's a lot of things that he mentions that we actually mentioned in previous episodes that really kind of piqued my interest too, is
nice.
He claims abductions are the NYM probing for weaknesses in humans, and that the NYM they're on a fourth dimension, but they want to be a part of the third dimension and linear time, but they're in a fourth dimension where the time is folded. And so when these NYM, these greys, alien greys, come into abduct people, it's all happening simultaneously. It's not happening in a linear fashion. So something like the Betty and Barney Hill abduction is happening at the same time as what's going on right now with this conversation we're having, that their time is not linear. It's just it's all simultaneous, but they're looking to come into our dimension to be a part of linear time and take over our Earth. So and also, again, and I reiterate this, it is in July of 1998 that this conversation is going on. They ask him questions about, what is something you do for entertainment in your time period? And he goes, oh, well, because he asked him if rock and roll is still a thing. And he goes, well, not really. I mean, you can hear it, if you go to like some oldies kind of station or something like that. But he goes, really, the big thing is neuro augmentation. And so if you've ever seen Demolition Man, where they have the sex scene where they put the helmets on and everything like that, he said that that's like a big thing. Brain implants and being on the internet and communicating and interacting and being social on the internet, through the mind is basically what everybody does for entertainment. And they watch videos in their minds, and they have sexual encounters, in their minds and everything like that. But he's talking about brain implants and neuro augmentation and all of this stuff that right now is very relevant and is something that we're all talking a lot about. And not a lot of people were talking about this in 1998. This was not something that was in 1998, we're literally talking 3 years after Windows 95 was the operating system in everybody's house that could afford a computer at that point. So it just really struck me that this is such an interesting listen, because it's just such a direct, it's you hear it directly from somebody who claims to be a time traveler. So, but yeah, always check out those old Art Bell episodes. Coast to Coast is always something really cool to listen to and kind of like dig back in the archives and check this stuff out, because if any of these subjects that we're covering right now, Art's probably already touched on it. So, but yeah, I thought the Single 7 story, I was like, that is absolutely perfect for this.
Oh, it's absolutely perfect. And that was an incredible time period, 98. Because that was, if I remember correct, 95, 96, 97, 98. That was 3 years after Nick Begich wrote Angels Don't Play This Harp, which was about harp weather modification. So that is very, very interesting indeed, because that was part of the subculture, sort of, but not really. And then we do have the, I believe in 96, the Air Force document owning, was it AF 2025, I think was the name of it. That was the plan for basically the Air Force to do all these crazy things by the year 2025. And look at this. Go back and look at some of those documentations and look at where we are right now. And
it's eye-opening.
Yeah. And one of those things is actually owning the weather. Okay. So that played a big deal into the whole harp thing. We'll have to do an episode on harp one day.
One other interesting little thing he brought up is that there will be politicians in the future and people in the future who will really focus on fighting the warming of the earth and what we commonly call climate change and everything like that, because it's a huge topic right now. But he says that these politicians are possible operatives of the NIM, because they're looking to keep the earth cool and fight the efforts that they're doing to save humanity. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Because even today there's people who are saying politicians are shape-shifting aliens and
stuff. We could see where this may have actually originated, possibly.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where some of those conspiracy theories actually
David Icke and this guy got together and drove it home.
You just never know, man. You just never know. But there are some, again, like Jess said, and I've said before, there's so much truth in some of those little things. It's just like, you can see how people play into it, because there are certain things there that just weren't, they weren't that big back then. So, that's a fact. So very interesting. That's a cool story, Jess.
Yeah.
Very cool story.
Well, guys, we're coming up on our time wall, I believe.
There are no time walls. Have we not taught you anything with this episode?
I forgot. We're coming up on our latest time dilation. So
maybe.
Welcome to Wild and Weird Radio, a wild and weird West Virginia podcast. We're starting everything all over.
This is the loop. This is where it all goes back around, right?
So, guys, if you have any weird stories that you want to share with us, you can head on over to wildandweirdwv.com, click the report a sighting. That'll just take you to the contact us tab. It'll give you a list of stuff you can fill out. You can submit your report there. You can just let us know what you've experienced. We'd love to hear your encounters. We'd love to hear your experiences that you've had. And we also add some of this stuff to our data pool. Almost all of it gets added to our data pool. And once you've submitted, you'll also be given access shortly after to be able to view some of our maps for sighting maps and things like that, as long as that's what your account pertains to. So if you want to get in touch with us, go for it. Guys, we really appreciate all the listeners. You all keep shocking us week after week after week with all the listens and comments and everything. It's just been fantastic.
Joe, I'd like to just enter for 1 second on that, because we just had pretty much a record for us over with the hybrid agenda episode.
We had like 2 of you guys watch that episode with us.
Yeah, we had more than that. But that was awesome. We had a good turnout. We had people who showed up and actually asked questions, and we had a conversation that went on for the entire duration of the episode. So you guys who showed up, that was awesome. Please come back and do it again. It's a lot of fun. One of us will be there, for the live. So if you want to ask questions like you did the last time, or throw in your 2 cents, by all means, we're there, and it's a lot of fun having you guys there in real time.
So Jess, take us off.
Okay, so if you want to find any of the work that I do, I am with Hellbent Holler. It's my partner, Joe, and I. We do Hellbent Holler. You can find me on Instagram at Hellbent Jessi, or you can go to YouTube and look up Hellbent Holler. All of my videos are on there. We're working on getting some more stuff out to y'all soon. And you can always contact me through Instagram. I always answer my DMs. Or you can contact me through my website, hellbentholler.com. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode. Every like, share, and subscribe helps get this out to other people who could enjoy all of our weird conversations, and it just brings more people into the fold. So we always appreciate you people being here with us, and I hope that none of you have any terrible time slips later on.
Well, guys, remember, like Jess said, you got to hit that like, share, subscribe button on both Hellbent Holler's YouTube page as well as Wild and Weird's page. Because if not, there's some poor time traveler out there right now who will get folded up in time, and he could get lost forever. And
so
the
that's
only
what
way
happened. That's what happened to Sam Beckett.
That could be.
You just figured out. Now it makes sense. I'm okay with the end of Quantum Leap now, finally.
He didn't subscribe and like to Wild and Weird Radio. Don't let that happen to another traveler.
Don't let that happen to Sam.
Don't let that happen.
Tragedy.
Stay wild and weird, everybody.